product management is one of the most sought after careers in the tech sector. Lying at the intersection of technology and business, its core focus lies on user experience and solving consumer problems. I am your host Paras Mehta, and today on India to Germany, we speak with Ashish Mittal. Ashish is the head of product management at N26 and talks to us about his experience in the field. Apart from N26, Ashish has also worked for other big names like Flipkart, Zalando, and Oracle in the areas of product management and software development. He is highly experienced in the areas of fintech and e-commerce with a strong affinity towards startups. Welcome, Ashish. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Paras. Happy to be here.
So, Ashish, I'm really curious to hear a little bit about you. I know that you're from India and you're in Germany now, just like me. So, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So let me start a little bit, from the early days. So I'm basically from a small town in India. Was born and brought up in a city called Meerut. It's a little up north. Was pretty much an average student all my life, with a very strong inclination towards sports, and the only other thing which I liked in my life was computers. Somehow, yeah. So yeah, gradually tended towards that a little bit more, and decided to do my engineering in computer science. Engineering is also probably one of the most common education in India, but I think I really
True.
liked computer science, and I just wanted to kind of get that, get in that kind of a profession. So right after the engineering, I joined GE, where basically I was helping the GE aircraft engineers to predict aircraft engine faults as a software developer. Then worked also as an engineer in Oracle, where I kind of really realized the value of customer thinking, business thinking, big box thinking. And that's when I decided to quit my job, went back to school, did my master's in business. And then from then on, I've been kind of, working more on the business product consumer side of the world. Um, yeah, so the way I see my life is basically I've worked for about 16, 17 years so far. And I will probably work for another 30 years. At least I hope so. So in Jeff Bezos's language, it's still a day one on my professional life front. Personally, I'm an active investor, father of a 3-year-old who's now started learning guitar at the age of close to 38. So,
Great. So, you started off with your education in India and started working there as well. But then you spent some time in the US also, and then you moved to Germany. So, I mean, you have lived in different countries. Yeah, I wonder, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how your experiences have been and why you decided to move to Germany in the end.
sure, absolutely. So it was more like an evolutionary process that has happened. So after I did my masters, I was placed from campus in one of the subsidiaries of Bank of New York Mellon Corporation, and that's how I kind of spent about 4 years in that company. Worked for wealth management products, um, and then I joined Flipkart, many years over there, and around 2017 was a very unique time in my life. So professionally, I had already spent 6+ years at Flipkart in variety of role. It was a really great journey, but then it was also 6+ years in the end, right? And personally, we were expecting a baby. My wife was expecting a baby, and we had a thought that this is the best time for do some personal experiments, because once the kids grow up, it's very hard to kind of, or at least that's what we have heard, it's very hard to kind of move around. So yeah, so we were originally very curious to probably go back to US, but then as luck would have it, a couple of my close friends and past colleagues from Flipkart had recently moved to Germany at that point in time, and more so in Berlin. And one of them was absolutely instrumental, who was at Zalando, and that person was responsible for me to be aware that there is a Berlin market which respects professionals like us, and there is a lot of startup activity happening. Of course, you read a little bit, but when you kind of hear it from someone personally, that's always a good. So it was more started as an experiment. We were planning to be here for 1-2 years only, but then now, of course, it's 3 years and we're still here. In hindsight, I would say that it was really great to be, here in Europe and Germany, rather than, going back to US at that point in time, because, Europe in general and Germany in particular have a very unique way of life, way of work, way of thinking, way of, philosophy. And I'm very happy to have gained this experience after coming here. So yeah, that's the journey to Germany.
Great. Yeah. I know. I totally agree. It's also, I mean, I have never lived in the US, but I can imagine it's very different from the US, although it seems similar in some respects. And of course, it's also different from India.
Totally. I would actually definitely say that probably US and India are much more closer than India and Europe in a lot of sense. But you know what? Like, they are different cultures, and they all teaches you so much. So it's always good to have a different perspective. It adds so much to your value of learning in life.
You mentioned Flipkart. I know Flipkart is one of the most famous startups in India, particularly in the e-commerce space. So I saw that you started at the company and then you grew very fast in your role and became a director there. So I would be really curious to hear about what your learnings were from your career at Flipkart.
A whole lot. So I think there is nothing that I can say here which can really quantify or which can really give a impression of how much I learned at Flipkart or how much I respect Flipkart. And think about it this way, right? So when I joined in 2012, the company was a relatively small company. It was a couple of hundred people if I exclude the operations and customer support departments. And right now it's probably 30,000 plus employees. It was, valued at less than few $100 million. It was not extremely small, but small. Right now, I think we're talking about, $40 billion of valuation in the IPO next year. So it was a company early days. It was kind of, growing to double the size every alternate month. And being in such an environment brings tremendous learning. It was fabulous. So we were celebrating 100 crores a month, and within the next 1 year, like in less than a year, we were celebrating 500 crores, and then it just kept on. We just celebrated all the right. If I were to kind of really think about key learnings, so maybe I can point to two of them. Yeah. The first one is, which I kind of learned really from the founders and the management team or the leadership team at that point in time, was to set really audacious goals that at first look impossible. So Sachin Bansal in 2013 or 2012 had a vision of $20 billion dollars in 2020. And I'm sure a lot of people kind of would have laughed at him at that point in time, because it just seemed impossible. But it's completely within reach, or at least that kind of gave a good direction to where Flipkart is today. So set really audacious goals, and then what is more important is to chase them with all your heart, body, and mind, and the results are inevitable. So this is my first learning. Yeah. So just to kind of elaborate a little bit on that. So my thinking is that strategy and planning phases of any project or any work that you do are really, really important. If it gives you a direction, it gives you a focus, it gives you a mode, a zeal of sorts, right? However, in the end, what really matters is execution, irrespective of how good you are in your planning, in your vision setting, in your road mapping or strategy. Things are invariably going to change, and at that point in time, you have to kind of improvise on the fly. So at that point in time, execution really is the best strategy. So that definitely is the first learning. And maybe a little bit off track, the second thing which I learned from Flipkart was the differentiation, or valuing generalist versus valuing specialist in a different way, right? So to give a little bit more context, there's a book called Range, which I basically came across when it was first recommended by a very avid investor, Vani Kola, from who's the MD of Kalari Capital right now.
Yeah, I
And
actually got that book. Sorry, I actually just got that book as a Christmas present. So it's great to hear about the book. But yeah, please.
That is amazing. So I read that book after my journey at Flipkart, and it was almost like I saw all the um, evidence and proof of what was written in the book already, and then read the book. So it was like super impactful from a reading perspective. But that really emphasized very clearly on what I'm about to say. Yeah. The thing is, uh, it basically challenges what we have learned all our lives. So all our life, as we grow up, a human mind is trained to take less risk. A human mind is trained to kind of have less standard deviation in their lives, right? So have a very straight path, which may or may not be the best thing to kind of do, right? Think about it from this way. So if you look at the current leadership at Flipkart, even today, pretty much everyone, they're all experts in their area, but that was not their area when they started their career or all through their lives. So they all kind of worked in different parts of the organization, and I believe that they are really doing really, really good right now because they have such a massive experience, holistic experience. So think about the CEO of Flipkart at this point in time. He was not a business, guy all his life. So he was an investor. Then he spent some time working on finance. He was a CFO. Then he moved on to do some business roles, and now he's doing, managing the entire company. He's the CEO of the company. Similarly, if you think about the CEO of Myntra, who is also a close friend, we work together in multiple projects, but he was a engineer at heart. He was not a fashion person at all. So I bet he's still an engineer at heart, but really, really going out and doing massively for Myntra. The best example of all of them is probably the CEO of PhonePe, which is another subsidiary of Flipkart, and he is amazing. His name is Samir. He started, you know, doing some work in the Western world, and then he moved back, started his music company, digital music company. Then he, as part of the acquisition, he joined Flipkart. He became head of that digital content space. Then he became head of marketing. Then he became head of engineering. And now he's kind of running one of the most successful payment organizations in India. So, long story short, I think the reason it's not a coincidence that these guys are successful. I think the reason why they are successful is they're able to relate to what they have done in one part of the world and one time frame to the other very, very neatly, which gives them a super edge in terms of their perspective. They can relate to things very differently versus someone who would have spent all their lives in payments or someone who would have spent all their lives in fashion. So this is a really, really big perspective which has changed quite significantly for me. By the way, this is just the top three examples. My belief, and from what I understand, if you look at almost the entire leadership over there, pretty much everyone is as exemplary as these guys. So really amazing.
It's very nice to hear about your perspective, because I'm about to start reading this book as well, and I heard a lot of praise about it as well, also including Bill Gates, who said that it was an eye opener, and it has a lot of praise. This book,
Absolutely.
So that you saw it in real life is also really nice to know.
Absolutely, highly recommend. Let me know how your reading goes and what your thoughts are after it.
Yeah, surely. Yeah. I have plenty of time to read the book now with the lockdown and all. So, yeah. And if I fast forward your career now, and let's say we straight talk about your current job at N26. N26 is also in some way similar to Flipkart because it has grown so quickly and now it's so well known here in Europe, at least. So, could you tell us, first of all, maybe to our listeners, what N26 is about and what your experience of working at N26 has been like?
Absolutely, absolutely. Cool. So, I mean, if you look at it at a super high level, you could think of N26 as a digital bank, right? So you can think about it as a bank which doesn't have a physical presence. So there are no branches that you can walk at. But you can also think about it as a bank which lives in your phone. So every time you have to kind of interact with your bank, instead of going to a bank branch, you just open your mobile phone app, and there you have it. Yeah. But if you look, slightly more deeper, at the core of it, the ambition is greater. The ambition is to kind of create a bank that 100 million users love to use. Yeah. And this will obviously not happen by just the technicalities of creating a digital bank without branches on your phone, etc. For this, everything has to be thought through ground up, right? So think about why were banks created in the first place? How has the users evolved over the years? What does it mean for banking experience in today's super connected world? What technology helps us do from a banking domain perspective, which 100 years back was not possible, or maybe even 2 years back was not possible. People working at N26 are curiously questioning every single one of these assumptions on a daily basis, and creating products that are that our customers will eventually love to use. Yeah. So of course, it's challenging and rewarding at the same time. But yeah, that's in a nutshell how I would talk about N26.
And so you are working as head of product management at N26. And yeah, I can also totally understand that it's challenging and at the same time exciting to be working for a company like that. Perhaps you could tell us, what do you find exciting and what do you find challenging at the company?
Absolutely. So, like, when you look at the mission, and the opportunities and possibilities that I just mentioned, yeah, it's very, very hard to not get excited about what you can change in the end consumers or the end customers' lives, right? Um, you're generally working to change the way one of the biggest and long-standing industries operate. Yeah, and this is also an industry which has seen very little to no innovation over the last few decades, right? So it's only now in the last 10 years that we see some innovation. Um, I see there is a lot kind of coming up over there, and this is also amplified significantly as you can also see the output of your hard work as a customer. So when you kind of do something at N26, you're also user of your product, right? So you can see how it changes your experience on a daily basis. So on one side, the opportunity and the mission and the ambition is really, really huge. On the other side, you can live the output, or you can kind of feel the impact of the output of your work at the same time. And to me, the combination of these two is extremely rewarding. At the same time, and like working at any other startup, things are very fast, right? So we have, or the industry is evolving on a daily basis. Our consumers are evolving on a daily basis. The organizations are evolving on a daily basis. The management is getting mature on a daily basis. We are all kind of improvising, and this could at times lead to adaptability fatigue, is what I would call it, right? So um, the amount and the frequency of changes could at times be intimidating to some people, and it's across the board. It's not necessarily to only a very junior person, or only the top person. It's basically across the board. So I would say that would be probably one of the challenge of working in such a setup.
And now, if I were to take a step back, I mean, you've worked for big names like Oracle, Zalando, N26, Flipkart, and you started out working as a software developer, and then you moved into product management.
Mhm.
Why did you decide to kind of take up, first of all, software development, and then move into product management later? And perhaps if there are any learnings that you would like to suggest to other people who might be looking to follow your footsteps.
Absolutely. I think this is a very good question. So my my reason to start working as a software developer was purely out of passion. So I think as a child, I was interested in only a couple of things. One was, of course, sports. I was an avid soccer player, and then the second was writing code, right? So, and I was not too much into playing games, but writing, those designer codes, making a pattern with stars in GW Basic, and so gradually, automatically, I tended a lot more towards software development. Picked it as a field of education, and then picked it as a career choice. And I was fairly successful. I was actually the youngest engineering lead in GE Aviation at that point in time. Um, what happened when I was in Oracle was actually what influenced me to move a little bit more towards consumers and towards product and towards business. In GE, I was managing, or I was kind of working on a product where I was the only person in the team. So in the entire Oracle India team, I was the only person who was working on a product called iPayments. So it is now, I think, called Oracle Payments. I think there are hundreds of people working on it right now. So pretty proud of what we kind of end up doing. But at that point in time, that was really the inflection point. So it really helped me focus on what's really important in the end. So till that time, I was pretty much focused on KPIs like uptime, response time, queries per second, accuracy, all the technical KPIs. And this was the time when I realized that user experience is super critical. The flow, bounce rate, the bigger picture, like business value proposition, and what is the user kind of getting, really kind of trying to achieve, and is your software kind of is helping them achieve, if much is much bigger than just the technical metric. And that's where I decided to quit my job, went back to school, and focus a little bit more on the consumer side, on the product side, on and creating value in general, right? So that was my transition to product management.
Okay. And what do you think would be, let's say, could one sort of say that there are some typical skills or some capabilities or competencies that one needs to have in order to be able to work in product management?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you my perspective. I think everyone will have a different perspective on it. But in my view, there are few things which are very important. So essentially, what a product manager is doing is he's trying to solve problems, and he's trying to, or she is trying to solve problems which matters to consumers, and she's trying to solve a problem which matters to consumer and can create an impact in consumers' life, right? So if and there are a lot of people who are kind of not doing this, and I think they should kind of move to this sooner or later. But in order to do this, what you need is the first quality, in my opinion, is curiosity. A general curiosity of why users are doing certain things that they are doing, or why is this not this way, or why is X doing Y and why is not Y doing Z. You know what I mean, right? So general curiosity about things, general curiosity about technology, general curiosity to learn. The second most important quality, in my opinion, is customer obsession. So I see a lot of people getting obsessed with technology and say, "Hey, how do I use blockchain?" I mean, I think that's a stupid thing to kind of do. What really matters is that this is the problem I'm trying to solve to consumer, and this is who my consumer is. I need to be able to kind of live what my consumer is going through in his mind, his philosophy, his thinking, his behavior pattern. So, and then the third very important quality, in my opinion, is product honesty. So uh, what I mean by product honesty is you should be able to very critically challenge and question what you are thinking, right? Um, a product manager has to be able to find faults in their own work, right? If they're not able to kind of do that, they're not going to kind of go anywhere. And maybe, the last one I would probably add as well, and this is not just for product manager, but I think in general, so the fourth quality, which is also true for product manager, but in general as also, is generally people should have a very high level of energy and positive energy at that to be able to be successful in any role whatsoever. So yeah, I think curiosity, customer obsession, honesty, very very critical for product management, and very high positive energy, very critical even otherwise.
Great. Yeah. Those all sound actually very true, very valid as well. I understand also that very often people tend to kind of overlook this customer perspective, and tend to focus on, yeah, that they want to use a particular technology, but they don't focus on, okay, what does the customer actually need? So yeah, it's very valid.
Awesome.
Maybe some of these people are looking to work at N26. Perhaps you could suggest some opportunities for people who are looking to work at the company.
Absolutely. So I think last year was a strange one, right? So if you look at N26 trajectory, till about early last year, we were growing leaps and bounds. With obviously the pandemic happening, we were mindful and we were not kind of overly um, overconfident of a lot of things, and we wanted to kind of wait and see around. So we overall hiring was we were being a little bit more cautious about that, but now things are changing. So we are going back, or N26 is going back to kind of hiring more broadly. And there are roles across the board. So I would highly encourage people to look at the N26 career website. There are roles from engineering to product management to product marketing to marketing. And the growth function is really amazing in N26. So the chief growth officer, I mean, that team is really good over there as well. So there across the board, there are a lot of roles over there. I'm sure we have opportunity for every skill that is out there.
Great. I'll make sure to put a link on the blog post for this podcast. And looking back, so you've lived in Germany for 3 years now. What would be your advice for people who are looking to move and establish themselves in the country?
That's a good one. That's a good one. So I think let me start with this. Um, Germany overall and Berlin, I think, are slightly different to each other in a way, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, one of the side effects of working in a tech company in Berlin is that there is no inherent reason, or there is no fundamental push for you to understand and live the German culture or the European culture for people who are out from outside Europe, right? Um, Especially, let's say, learning the local language here, like learning German. um, there is no advantage, fundamental advantage at work, in most places at least, that you have over a person who is kind of speaking German, and which in some ways is good, but in some way it's not really that great as well, right? So I've for anyone coming to Germany, I would highly advise to set them properly right in the beginning. So learn the language, learn the culture, learn the people, get a driver's license, set up yourself for success. Because once you have kind of already gone through some months and some years, it becomes very difficult to handle some of these things. And at the same time, it there is a constant disadvantage that you have, maybe not in your professional life, but maybe just kind of way of life in general. You will be able to appreciate uh, Germany much more if you are really kind of set up. So I would really highly advise to get some of these initial hurdles, like a lot of people kind of don't take driver's license in Berlin, but I think it's really important to change your quality of life significantly. So yeah, from my mistakes, I would highly advise to solve some of these things very early on in Germany, and then Germany you will really like Germany if you kind of solve these things early on.
Yeah, I agree. And particularly on the driving license part, because I got my driving license last year. And now with the lockdown, it really helps because I can at least in some cases, I can avoid taking the public transport because to avoid some risk.
Totally,
And
and,
I
and
can
there's
use
so
it.
many, so many, places in the woods. There's so many, places, even if they're like not really known places, just kind of drive around where you kind of go. The freedom that it brings. Similarly, is when you learn German, right? When you understand the local language, there's a flavor. There's a context of why a German behaves the way he or she behaves. Um, and you need to understand that deeply before you can really appreciate those things. So highly advise people to learn about the local culture, learn about the local language, set yourself, your surrounding with the right things that matters to you, and then I think it will be a much happier journey.
So, on a last note, I recently also saw on LinkedIn that you had posted some very positive views about 2021. I wonder what makes you so excited about.
Absolutely. So see, I mean, my point is this, right? It's really straightforward to think about 2020 in a certain way, especially in light of COVID and the pandemic, right? Um, you can think of it, as something which brought a lot of pain, a lot of misery, a lot of restrictions. Um, a lot of people also call it a wash year, right? So basically, a year where nothing really has happened, right? And this is all true. I'm not denying it. This is all true. My heart goes for people who have suffered in this. I have a couple of friends who have gone through this experience personally. I know people who have family members who have gone through it. This is miserable. This is really bad. This is all true in a lot of sense. Yeah. However, if you see it in a slightly different way or the other way around, nothing really is the same. It's not really a wash year. It has changed so many things in so many different ways. The consumer patterns has changed dramatically, right? So the saving patterns have changed dramatically. The way people interact with their money has changed dramatically. The way people work in their offices have changed, fundamentally. The way people learn has changed fundamentally. Shopping is changed forever. There is decades and decades of digital transformation, which is now compressed, quite compressed in one single year. Yeah. um, Almost, I would probably go on and say that almost every running business that we had in the starting of the year 2020 had to really reinvent itself to stay relevant in the new world. Yeah. And the ones who are not able to do it, or the ones who were very slow in getting there, have paid high price and will pay high price going forward. Yeah. So in this context, historically speaking, this is really great opportunity for some of the disruptive businesses to come in and really transform the way business work, and business values, and business opportunities, exploiting different business opportunities. Yeah. um, this brings a step change in the overall continual growth cycle of different segments and different domains in the world. Look at history, right? So if we look at, if I just kind of speak historically, some of the biggest businesses were created during times like this. Microsoft was created in the oil embargo recession of the 70s. EA Sports was created in the recession of 80s. Amazon in the 90s. Flipkart, Airbnb, Square, all in the 20s during the time of active recession. So I believe that times like these fundamentally make you or force people to think in structurally solving things in a completely different way, and this is the opportunity that I was talking about. I personally know some of my friends and ex-colleagues who are starting up on concepts which can totally be any one of these companies in the next 5 years. So I mean, I see some of them as becoming, as big as Apple or Microsoft in, let's say, 10 years, 15 years. They at least have the potential. So it happens or not, obviously, is a different matter. But I think those opportunities are really, really open. And people with the right mindset of taking risks, understanding user pattern, consumer behavior will gain significantly in acting in that. So I'm super curious to see what happens next, especially in a couple of years from now, more prominently in 2021 and 22. There certainly is going to be a lot of startup action. Can't wait to see it happen.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it has been really an extraordinary year. I mean, mostly in a sort of a negative sense, let's say. But yeah, there is also an opportunity that if one knows where to look and has the right mindset, perhaps one can also grab this opportunity. I agree with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ashish, thank you very much for all your valuable advice and sharing your experience with us on this podcast. It has been really great talking to you.
Thank you very much, Paras. This is really amazing for me as well, and this is really some good work that you are doing. I'm sure there are so many people out there who are listening to different podcasts or the different content that you're creating on your site, and you're helping them on their key decisions, the decisions that will change their life. So, good work and all the best.
Thank you very much. That's all, folks. Remember to subscribe to our podcast and check out our blog on india2germany.com. See you next week.